What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video. Today we're talking about the New England Patriots in our season preview series, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you're new, be sure to hit that like button to help me and my channel and the algorithm out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more of this series and more football content in general, just hit that big red subscribe button. Tell me what you think about the Pats down below in the comment section. How many wins do you think they come away with? What's year 2 for Mac Jones look like? Who are some X factors and some games you're looking forward to watching this team play? Love to have your thoughts, and I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about the Patriots down below. So, if you're new to this series, welcome to it. You can go back and check out some of the other videos we've already done. Maybe your favorite teams in there, maybe some division rivals. Want to hear more of my thoughts, or you want to see all the videos and be able to one-up all your friends and have, what I think is good football content. So let's go ahead and start talking about the win range and projected win total. So 7 to 10. I know it's a little bit wider than what I've been doing in previous videos, but part of it is there's just so many outside factors. One, like the division, the AFC, and then also the roster itself, and something you can't quantify with a depth chart, like what does year 2 of Mac Jones look like? Is it a sophomore slump? Or does he have this like Tom Brady effect where, yeah, sure, not an athlete, but just becomes that much better of a processor, right? Like that was the biggest strength of his coming out of Alabama. Above the shoulders, he had it above everybody else pretty much. Him and Lawrence, I guess, close, but Mac Jones, his selling point was being a processor and a sound decision maker. Does that get better in year 2? It could. I mean, we saw Brady get better with it, from the beginning of his career into his prime. So can he do something similar? Of course, those two are just like eternally locked for the rest of their lives. But, I think something that holds that back is like it would have been year 2 with Josh McDaniels and his system. Now you're talking about it's probably going to be something similar in that family, but you have to get used to how, I guess, Matt Patricia wants to call games and, his game flow and all that sort of stuff. So that might stack or, create some stagnant growth there for Mac Jones. But I'm still excited. But, again, a wide win range. I got him at 8 and 9 right now. It could definitely be close. And, that's just such an interesting division because the Dolphins are poised for a breakout. I like, Bill Belichick is the best head coach in NFL history. Mac Jones was pretty impressive. So there's a lot there to make this team impressive and worthy of being in the playoff conversation. But I think compared to the Bills, who I think front runners in the AFC East pretty safely. And then I think the Dolphins, with all they've done, probably superseding the Patriots as that number 2 team in the division. But it's definitely going to be close, and there's still lots of good pieces to build with. And again, Bill Belichick. Don't doubt Bill Belichick. So let's go ahead and start talking about position group by position group. I've already talked about Mac Jones, so we'll skip over that one. But I'm excited to see his year 2 growth and development. The offensive line is in a healthy place. It's kind of interesting. Trent Brown's playing left tackle, and you flip over and have Isaiah Wynn play right tackle when he's been playing on the left side. But hey, again, I'm not gonna doubt Bill Belichick. It is interesting when you think about Dante Scarnecchia, who's been the offensive line coach forever in New England, not being there. He's now retired, so the impact that might have on younger players like a Cole Strange we'll talk about later on, and how quickly he can hit the ground running. But that being said, tackles are solid. Michael Onwenu is really good. David Andrews, and then Cole Strange might have been a reach, but he figures to be a good football player. And then the running backs, I'm a big Damian Harris guy. Actually, just had him as a keeper. I got a fantasy football draft tonight, so he's gonna be my 10th round pick or whatever. So that's not bad. And then Ramondre Stevenson going into year 2. He was an exciting player. He's such an interesting back because his body and then how he runs are juxtaposed, but in turn makes him such a well-rounded back. Like he has the body of a power back, but he tries to be an elusive back or a shifty running back, and it kind of creates, like, it shouldn't work, but it does, this like well-rounded, really solid running back. And Damian Harris continues to cough up the football. He had some fumble issues last year. Ramondre Stevenson might be seeing the field a ton this year, which is it's intriguing. He's talking about fantasy, might be a decent draft and stash type of guy. And then get to the wide receivers, and a lot's been talked about here. There's no one standout player or elite talent here, but they all have their strengths. I think the best wide receiver in that bunch is Jacoby Myers. Not a lot of people want to talk about him, but especially as this big slot possession guy, move the chains. Jacoby Myers really solid at that. And, have him find the end zone a little bit more, and, he'll start to become a little bit more of a household name. That's been the one thing he's kind of struggled with. But then you talk about the guys on the outside. Nelson Aguilar was getting a lot of buzz. He was disappointing last year after the, 2-year, $16 million contract he got. Hopefully he's better in year 2. And then you have him and Tyquan Thornton, who's also getting rave reports in training camp, which, take all that with a grain of salt, whatever. But 2 guys with a lot of speed, especially Tyquan Thornton, former track star. So fastest 40 this year's combine as well. Those guys can make it happen, down the field. Now, can Thornton have consistent hands? Aguilar's had some issues like that early on in his career. So there's still some questions that need some answers there. But guys who can get open down the field. And then you have another possession, win at the catch point, physical wide receiver in Devontae Parker. So add him for a 5th round pick. Not a whole lot, but when you look at that group and it's like, okay, you're not going to add a superstar, but that was like the one thing, the one skill that you didn't have in that room. So that's a solid add, and for next to nothing. So good player. We'll see how he fits in the offense. Then Kendrick Bourne was kind of the most impressive player, and I was kind of talking him up before the year began. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but just a smooth, crisp route runner, quick enough out of his breaks, dependable hands, and figures to be maybe the number 1 on the outside going into year 2 in New England. So a little bit of a surprising quote-unquote breakout, not a full breakout, but comparing him to Nelson Aguilar, which of those 2 signings last free agency period, not the one we just had, but the one before, who those 2 wide receivers most people would have predicted to be, the team leader in receiving yards, most people would have said Nelson Aguilar, I would bet. But it was Kendrick Bourne. So, year 2, maybe he gets that much better, but it's just a solid stable of options. Nobody, has you turning and rubbernecking or anything like that, but they're all dependable. And again, with a quarterback that is super accurate at Mac Jones and a cerebral processor and just good above the shoulders, maybe that's good enough, So, and part of that's the scheme. That has 1,000 questions that needs answered in and of itself, but it could come together. They may not have a superstar in a time where I feel like you need to have 2 number 1 wide receivers. They don't have one, but it still at the same time could work, especially bouncing off of the running game that I think should be one of the best in the NFL. Then over the defense, this has been a group that's kind of continuously is just, they're again similar to the wide receiver room where there's no real standout names, but like you look at the defensive line, right? We're talking about Christian Barmore later, but Matt Judon's a solid signing from Baltimore. He racks up sacks, but more that's in the front half of the season. Dietrich Wise, Lawrence Guy, solid player. Henry Anderson, who used to play for the Jets. All, solid, but they fit what Bill Belichick and Steve Belichick and, Jerron Mayo's a big figure in that room as well. The inside linebacker coach could be doing some defensive play calling maybe this year as well. They just kind of fit that New England identity. And then talking about the linebacking core outside of the pass rusher and Matt Judon. Juwan Bentley's a little bit slower. He's more of your old school thumping linebacker, a factor in the run game. And then they get a trade where they bring in Mac Wilson Sr. in exchange for Chase Winovich, and he's a little bit lighter. Skill set's more in coverage, so that's a nice way to balance that room out. But you also have Raekwon McMillan, who hasn't totally put it together. Jelani Tavai's been a bit of a disappointment, drafted a little early, in my opinion, by the Lions, but a chance for him to, I guess, reunite with Matt Patricia, but also just a chance for him to kind of resurrect and, turn his career around, where, New England, for a long time under the Belichick era, has been known for their inside linebackers. And then we'll talk about the cornerback position, so I don't want to talk about that too much, but Devin McCourty, solid as it gets, continues to just be a standout player as a free safety. Like when you talk about true deep coverage safeties, he's still one of the best in the game. And then you have an Adrian Phillips and a Kyle Duggar and also a Jabril Peppers. All 3 of those guys feel like strong safeties, guys you want to have in the box. But I think Duggar, maybe with his athleticism, you can get a little bit more out of him. Jabril Peppers is kind of versatile and flexible. Maybe he can do some dime backing, maybe some nickel corner role. I don't know. He's versatile, but, he's also been a guy where I feel like the more you ask of him, the worse his play gets. So that's also a guy who we haven't seen play great football in a while. So, that's a reclamation project in and of itself as well. So there's things to like, but at the same time, a lot of it is kind of meh. So, 500 kind of feels about right for this team. But moving on, realistic goal and then reach goal, they are what they sound like. Realistic goal, Mac Jones becomes the focal point of the offense. There were, a couple games last year where the Patriots won because their rushing attack and the offensive line kind of carried the way. And, you could point to the Bills game where he has 3 passes, but absurd weather conditions aside, there were other games where it wasn't Mac Jones winning games. I'd like to see that change. Like, I want to see anytime the Patriots wins because Mac Jones played a pretty good game. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be every game, right? Because you're going to have games against, lackluster opponents that turn it over and whatever. Your defense wins you the game. I'm not saying it has to be every game, but I'd like to see, especially in close games, like it's Mac Jones that's stepping up, putting the team on his back and trying to make those big plays and being, again, that focal point, the center point of the offense. So then reach goal, return to the playoffs. They were one and done last year, knocked out by the Bills, but, as much as, I do like the Dolphins, you're still leaning on an asterisk and Tua. Can he take that step forward? And then, who knows what injuries could do to the Bills? That's something I can't account for. There's no way to quantify that right now. But this team could feasibly be a 7 seed. Maybe Miami disappoints. New England exceeds my expectations. Everything kind of comes together. Mac Jones is awesome in year 2 and elevates that wide receiver room. Like, there's a pathway. I don't think it's a wide one. It's probably a lower percentage one. Not something I would put money on, but nonetheless, it is plausible. So, of course, that makes sense as a reach goal. Moving on to X factors. So, Cole Strange, unfortunately enough, he's probably going to be holding this like reach label for his entire career. And, I don't think the Rams did a bad thing, but, making jokes, we were looking at that guy in the 4th round, or the back of the 3rd with their comp pick. Just the optic of that came across a little wrong, so, they have to apologize or whatever. But I wasn't bugged by that. He's going to be a good football player. And I'm leaning a little bit on, the New England tradition of being able to have, plug-and-play start. I mean, Michael Onwenu's a pretty good, example of that. He was a later round pick that, even as a rookie, stood out. So the Patriots just kind of knack with getting these offensive linemen up to speed and having them be big parts of the offense, and just honestly not weak links, which I've talked about a ton, weak link sport. But no Dante Scarnecchia. It's an interesting wrinkle in the fold there. But he's also stepping into a starting role at left guard. So right off the jump, he's got a sizable opportunity to kind of maybe put that reach label aside and turn some heads. But again, starter, you don't want to be that weak link on the offensive line. So there's a big role on his plate. Christian Barmore going into year 2, fell to the 2nd round. Great pass rusher. Not a guy that you want. I mean, you would love to see him impacting the run game, but that's not his strength. Honestly, at this point, if he plays to his strength, it's about single gap, pass rush, getting the quarterback. And you signed a Matt Judon last year, and you still have a Dietrich Wise, who's dependable. But if you added an interior threat, like you don't have a whole lot of teams that, obviously there's only one Aaron Donald on the planet, but like the impact that Chris Jones has for the Chiefs, or Cam Hayward has for the Steelers, or what we saw last year from Jeffrey Simmons and the Titans. If Barmore were to take that step forward in year 2, that changes a lot of how this Patriots defense, I think, could operate. And even just look back to prior Bill Belichick teams, like different player completely. But Vince Wilfork changed the way defenses or offenses had to attack the New England defense. Richard Seymour is now an NFL Hall of Famer because of a lot of what he could do there in the middle. So adding that type of guy in a time in the league where there's few and far between for these true pass game disruptors in the middle, that could add a ton of just natural likability and just a more positive perception of that defense. I think it could really shift the way people look at that defense. Where I'm a little bit meh on them, you take a year 2 step forward with Christian Barmore and maybe a little more favorable, and maybe that helps Matt Judon. It helps Dietrich Wise and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different what ifs you could play here, but talented player. Thought he should have been a 1st round pick. Falls to the 2nd. Patriots get a good value at pick 40. This is the time for him to take that step forward and become a real difference maker for the Patriots. And then, the last one, I'm cheating here. I don't like putting, multiple or something as vague as boundary corners, but man, when you look at this depth chart, and I guess Jonathan Jones, who's played a lot of nickel, is going to be playing on the outside now, so that's a transition. At least he's a good athlete, really, really fast, so that's an encouraging piece to work with. Terrence Mitchell's been getting a lot of buzz, but, Terrence Mitchell's been in the league for a long time, bit of a journeyman, so come with proper expectations there. And then you also have Jalen Mills, who's been this, maybe he's, a safety, maybe he's a nickel corner, maybe he's a straight up corner, but he's been kind of meh at best at a lot of those spots. And then I do kind of like their nickel options with Miles Bryant and then Marcus Jones, 3rd rounder out of Houston. So I'm not really worried about the nickel, and that's why I preface boundary, but there's just a lot of guys that I have serious question marks about as starters. And, that's what the Patriots are having to rely on. And, we saw more zone last year from Bill Belichick and crew, and maybe that's the case again this year. So it's not that big of a deal, and that's why, maybe Jonathan Jones can stick on the outside now versus, very man-heavy, tradition with New England. So there's a lot to figure out there, and it's really only going to come to light once we see this team in the regular season and I see them playing for real games. So it's a wait and see, but, man, if nobody steps up on the outside, I just have a hard time believing in this defense being, something special, and especially when you look at the offense, and maybe it's not a unit that's going to, score a whole lot, and probably not one of the league leaders in that department, and where we have concerns about that wide receiver room. If this defense isn't special, or, at least, really good, that's where I start to get a little concerned about the Patriots and perceive them as a potential 7 or 8 win team. So then moving on, after a long tangent, let's talk about our games to watch. Week 2 against the Steelers. I think 2 teams that right now, more often than not, probably outside of people's, AFC playoff predictions on the outside looking in, trying to take that leap forward. Pittsburgh, starting to get some hype for the quarterbacks, but, that's against the Seahawks and the Jags, and, Pickett looks good against backups, and I'm not trying to take away any of that, but these are two teams with a lot of questions that need answers. For the Steelers, it's, the offensive line, quarterback, corner. For the New England Patriots, it's wide receiver, corner, maybe linebacker. So two teams that, again, have a lot of questions, but if they get the right answers and players step up, wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if they get in the playoff mix. And also the playoff seeding implications here, maybe for the wild card, that would be a pretty wild world if both those teams are competing the wild card in a division or in a conference with the Raiders, the Broncos, the Chargers, whoever doesn't win the AFC West, basically. So low percentages there, but just two teams that have always played each other close and kind of been some of the best teams in the AFC as well over the last couple of decades. So fun game to watch there. And I had to put this caveat here. I don't put division games in here. So yeah, Patriots-Bills games. Yeah, no doubt. Those are games to watch. Patriots-Dolphins, same thing. Moving on to week 9 against the Colts, home game. So we'll see what the weather is there in the middle of the season. No guarantee that could impact the game, but if it does, and Matt Ryan get a little older, weaker arm, that could be an advantage for the Patriots there. But Colts defense, that's really solid. I worry about their, cornerback room. So can the Patriots come away with a win here? Can Tyquan Thornton come away with a couple big plays? Can Kendrick Bourne really look good in here? Can he shine against the Colts? And, also a little bit of a revenge game for Stephon Gilmore. Didn't even think about that when I originally put it down, but an added layer of intrigue. But again, two teams that, I think the Colts are my pick to win the AFC South. If I had to guess, probably a majority of people would do the same thing. But I could also see a world where they're fighting for a wild card spot. So there's that, continued thread here. Really for all three of these games, these could be, wild card implications, types of tie-breaking situations. But, the Colts and the Patriots, these two teams were not overly impressed with their boundary players on offense and on defense. Quarterbacks with not the most arm talent, if you want to call it that. So feels like two teams that are pretty similar. The offensive line's one of their biggest strengths. You feel good about their rushing attack. Yeah, so they share a lot of similarities. I like the coaches, different ways and different backgrounds, but again, a lot of similarities, and the playoff implications are there as well. And then week 15 at the Las Vegas Raiders, also Sunday Night Football. This is the Josh McDaniels versus his teacher Bill Belichick. So that's a fun storyline against Sunday Night Football. So big time rhetoric implications out from this game. If the Patriots come away with a big win in Vegas, that could turn some heads, and especially if this team's still in the hunt at that time, maybe that gets them hot, gives them the momentum they need going down the stretch. But also, you look at the Raiders, and I'm concerned about their secondary. I feel good about their pass rush. That might be the exact type of team that New England can have a good game against, right? That offensive line is one of the biggest strengths of New England. I just said that. And, maybe they have what it takes to slow down a Max Crosby and Chandler Jones duo and pick apart a Rock Ya-Sin and a Trayvon Mullen and take advantage of some holes created by the safeties, whatever the case may be. So I think it's one where the Patriots, at least on offense, line up and match up pretty well against the Raiders. On the flip side, I have no idea anyone in the New England area who could keep up with Devontae Adams. So I have no earthly idea what the Pats' answer is for that, and it's probably more zone. This is probably a very zone-heavy game, even if they're not trying to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see what team has the answer, specifically in the secondary. That's going to be the difference in my eyes. If the Pats can find a way, stalwart, slow down Devontae Adams, Derek Carr and company, okay. Then I think their offense matches up pretty well, and they'll have a good showing on national television. But if it's the other way around, that bodes well for the Raiders. But those are my games to watch, and that is going to do it for my New England Patriots season preview. Tell me what you think about the Pats down below in the comment section. Sorry again for my long rambling, but this is an interesting team to talk about. Love to have your thoughts. How many wins they come away with? Who are some X factors, and what are some games you're looking forward to watching? I respond to just about every comment, so I'd love to be able to talk to you about the Patriots down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It really would help me out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more of this series and football content in general, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.